Hey everyone, I'm your host Piers Kicks, and welcome back to Metaverse Musings, which is a research-focused podcast that's part of Delphi Digital. We explore the integral components behind what many believe will be the internet's successor, a virtual extension of the natural world where most of us will eventually live, work, and play. To some, it represents our next great milestone as a network species, and to others, it is something to fear. With our guests, we discuss the technology, philosophy, and culture behind this brave new world. If you're not yet subscribed to the Delphi Research Portal, then I fear for your soul. You're missing out on the most incisive analysis that the digital asset space has to offer. Seriously, check it out. Nothing said on this podcast is a solicitation to buy or sell any security or token or to make any financial decisions. This podcast features sponsors, and any ads are not an endorsement by Delphi Digital and are for informational purposes only.
Hey guys, I wanted to tell you about our new sponsor, Crypto.com. Crypto.com's exchange is a rapidly growing trading venue with a strong retail flow. Top institutions can receive a credit line and highly competitive maker-taker fees. Their platform is robust, secure, and compliant. You can get started trading today on the Crypto.com exchange, and to get in touch with their institutional sales team, visit bit.ly/CryptoDelphi now or click the link in the show notes. Now back to our show.
Hey guys, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Metaverse Musings. Today's episode is going to be run slightly differently as we pursue a more investigative angle. I'm joined today by DuckM, who is the owner of FancyHire, one of the leading RuneScape training services. Duck, thank you for joining.
Thank you very much for having me. I look forward to answering your questions and giving your viewers an opportunity to see into our operation.
Awesome. Yeah, no, excited to get going. Could you, first up, I guess, give a kind of backdrop on what it is that you guys actually do at FancyHire?
Okay, so we are a power leveling service. So this is for a game called RuneScape. And ultimately, we play on people's accounts for money. So we have a lot of reasons for that. We can dig into that later on. But ultimately, we play on people's accounts on RuneScape.
Mm-hmm. So, could you give a rundown also, I guess, in your personal background before RuneScape? What kind of attracted you to it? How did you get involved with this whole world?
So yeah, as a teenager, I used to play RuneScape, and it was a very attractive game. And I have a lot of good memories playing this game. So what attracted me to RuneScape was not just the game, but the community. And generally speaking, the game is very, very unique. So naturally, I was attracted to it, and I seen some videos a few years ago, and that sort of re-sparked the Kindle for RuneScape.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I guess what having played RuneScape for a bit, what really made you realize that this kind of setting up this operation was possible? How did you move towards doing that?
Okay, so just for some background, so I used to play RuneScape as a teenager. Then a few years ago, I re-entered into the game, started playing it more. I then realized the whole nature of the game is a massive time investment. So if we sort of get some context, so RuneScape has a leveling based system, and it requires around 2,000 hours just to max your account. So the trouble with RuneScape is you don't get access to certain content straight away, and you have to invest a lot of time. So in some cases, anywhere from I would say 500 to 2,000 hours to access game content. And this is quite a big investment personally for many people. And it's not an investment that people can make. They can't play the game 3 hours a day for 2 years just to then get access to some content.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, as a result, I turned to Button, which is a program that plays the game for you. It's not a viable solution. So it took me a year to figure out that it's not a viable solution for RuneScape. So,
and that's because Jagex, the company that runs RuneScape, sort of clamps down on all of that third-party botting software, right? I used to dabble in the dark arts as well, but as you well know, I mean, they've got pretty sophisticated anti-botting software these days, so it's becoming less and less viable.
That's right. Just for some context, so I spent a year doing botting, and I would say that I invested quite a lot of money and time and effort, and ultimately it's not a viable solution. So once I sort of spent a year doing this, I realized it. And although there's thousands of people botting actively at the moment, for me, it's not a viable solution. So after realizing the fact, I then turned to OSRS services. However, I had a lot of trouble finding a professional service. So some services had bad pricing strategies, some had confusing terms and conditions, and then more importantly, some of them also have a lack of accountability and transparency. So after a year butting, I already built up a reputation. Once I looked for OSRS services, I then met my business partner, and he's based in Venezuela. And we slowly realized that there is a viable solution to my problem, which is for people from Venezuela to play my accounts.
Mm-hmm. And so where did you actually meet this guy to begin with?
So I met him on a betting website, and he was someone who participated in the marketplace. He was offering very cheap labour, and initially I would resell his accounts under my name. But within about 1 or 2 months, we realised quite clearly that the value we provided could be multiplied, and the approach that we was taking was not the best approach. So we decided that we would start a service ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, and so had this partner down in Venezuela was he working alongside others? I'm kind of curious. Obviously, you're able to sort of benefit from that kind of cheaper virtual labor, I guess, because of the relative, strengths of the economies and whatnot. You mentioned that, a lot of your clients are mainly either American or Canadian or sort of European, and they can afford to pay the $8 a day or whatever, but that's a meaningful amount of money in a country like Venezuela. But I'm curious as to why, maybe other countries weren't a good target or whatever. Did he already have operations and contacts down there?
So at the time when we first started, we only started with 5 people, and I guess for me the only attractive part was I'd rather pay $1 rather than $10. So it's purely a money motivation. For me, there's no point paying more money when you don't have to. So we started off with 5 people. That was creating accounts for us under my name, and that's how we started. Yeah.
Okay, and how do you guys, I guess, determine what's the sort of fair amount of value to pass on to your trainers? I mean, obviously, one might present the angle that it might seem a bit sort of I don't want to use the word exploitative, but you know what I mean. How did you decide what was fair to pass on to those trainers?
Okay, so for some context, we run like we run a professional we run like a professional business. So we're always looking to improve. We're looking to become better than our competitors. We're always thinking of the next steps on the ladder, so to speak. And if we can make a few good decisions every day, then it's a good day for us. So that's just some context. So for us at the moment, there is no moral component. The money that is paid to the trainers is far higher than any other job that is available physically in Venezuela. It's as simple as that. So working
It's
full
amazing.
time from the internet is the only viable option for many, many people. And so with FancyHire, we basically provide a safety net for our trainers. So we're not a run-of-the-mill type of operation. We like to make sure that we provide the conditions for our trainers to thrive in Venezuela and to enable them to live a good life, basically. So with that in mind, I would say thanks to our operation, we're helping a lot of individuals and their families with a very horrible economic situation. And for what it's worth, in terms of the time investment, the money investment, the capital investment, there's nothing in comparison to the benefits. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Because I first came across this through a sort of YouTube. I think that Sir Pugger had put up, and he was showing that some of the trainers, or perhaps the trainer handlers or something, was starting to earn sort of 10x the monthly wage of like a local doctor down in Venezuela, which I found just completely mind blowing.
Or now that you talk about that, I can give you some insight. So if we put it into perspective, in Venezuela, you can earn about $10 per month in an average job. That's kind of if you're lucky as well. So it's not like $10 guaranteed. You could get $5 per month USD, like the equivalent basically. And as a doctor, $15 is sort of like the average from what I've heard. Um, so for anyone based in a place like where we live, for example, in Europe or America or any other place that is a lot more developed, this $10 is nothing. It's like half an hour's work for many people. So that instantly sort of puts into perspective the sort of economic hardships that Venezuela are in at the moment. Another example I could give you is, for example, their neighbor Colombia. Their average wage is around $300 per month. Brazil is in a similar bracket as well. So with that in mind, $10 a month, that's the average. If you can access virtual labor in Venezuela, then if we compared it to all the other places in the world where you can get cheap labor, virtual labor, Venezuela is the cheapest. So you're ultimately putting your competitors into a tight spot. And for us, like for FancyHire, for our business, for our operation, a lot of competitors are sort of kicking and screaming on their way out of the market. And some other ones are gently losing their market share thanks to the Venezuelans.
It's an awesome position to be in, though, where I mean, you're driving costs down in a material way for your customers, but also being able to materially improve people's lives down there. It's really awesome. You mentioned that the operations now, was it how big did you say it had got it?
It changes quite a lot. So we sort of operate on a franchise type model. So we have individual officers and managers who are in charge. We give them orders, our customers' orders, and then they have to make sure they comply to our internal policies. If they don't comply, then they're not like a franchisee type of thing. So, so we grew from around 5 full-time trainers, and now we're approaching 75 full-time Venezuelan trainers, and we have a goal to reach a few hundred by next year, later next year.
Wow, that's incredible. How big do you think, sort of on the sort of slightly longer term horizon, how big do you think this could grow in terms of the demand you're seeing for these services?
If we think about it, there's nowhere else in the world where you can access this sort of labor so cheaply. So if your business model fits into that, then you can take advantage of that. And as a result, in the future, there's a very positive outlook in Venezuela. So even what we charge $1 per hour, that is a major. Just to put it into some perspective, some of our trainers earn the equivalent of 25 normal Venezuelans.
Wow.
Yeah.
In terms of average salaries, that's amazing. Are you able to shed any light there maybe on what kind of margins you take? You say you charge sort of $1 an hour. Does that vary by type of service and type of activity you're doing, or how much I guess actually gets passed on to the end trainer?
Okay, so margins, it depends on the trainers themselves. So if they're experienced, if they're specialized in certain tasks, how much time they have. We do operate on a minimum SLA, so we guarantee to our customers that we would play their accounts for 8 hours per day. That's our agreed SLA. So let's say some trainers can play more than 5 days a week. Some are specialized in certain tasks. So the margins do vary depending on the task and the package that we sell to the customer and what package they are involved in. So we offer packages to our customer that cost anywhere between 60 cents per hour to $2 per hour. And some packages we would split the same order between 2 trainers, and then they can play the same account for up to 20 hours per day.
Wow, that's amazing. On that topic, how do you are there not some kind of prevention mechanisms that Jagex and RuneScape are looking to implement in terms of accessing these accounts from Venezuela? Do you need to run via sort of VPN setups, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we have a strict firewall in place within every single office, and any connection attempt to RuneScape servers via a Venezuelan IP is blocked automatically. So we route everything through American data centers. If we didn't do this, we would have a lot of issues, and we've had issues in the past, and we've learned our lessons accordingly. So ultimately, Jagex, if they see you're from Venezuela, they'll make your life really difficult in a lot of ways.
Interesting. Yeah, because I found it pretty crazy that I think perhaps the first time I was introduced to this whole operation, this idea, it was someone that kind of speculated that a bunch of these services had been going down at the same time as some power outages around Venezuela, and had basically speculated that there was virtual labor being exported there. Can you shed any light on that?
Yeah, I can give you some insight. Yeah, for sure. So Venezuela in general, they do have a lot of blackouts, so electricity issues. So a good few months ago now, there was a big power outage in Venezuela, and as soon as within a few days of the power outage, the gold prices in RuneScape was going up, and it's quite. I would say it's fair to say that the majority of RuneScape, as in their community and their players, they understand the role that Venezuelans have in their community, in their game, and
Mm.
OSRS gold prices, which is basically gold, the currency of RuneScape, is directly affected by Venezuelans. So, if people are happy to work for, let's say, the average gold farmer would make $30 to $60 a month. Um, if you want to make money on RuneScape, it's much more attractive to just buy the gold rather than
Mm.
spend a whole month making the equivalent of an hour's work. It's like that. So it's very attractive. So when power goes down on a national level, you can sort of expect for gold price. I guess you would expect that gold prices would go up because the Venezuelans can't sell their gold
Mm.
to whoever
Yeah,
they sell
there's
it to.
a supply squeeze. Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
interesting. I also found earlier in the year with the whole, first few weeks of lockdown, seeing how much RuneScape gold prices appreciated. They're up like 40 to 50% in that first month. Was really interesting to see.
Yeah, with COVID, they had a time in Venezuela where they just said to everyone, you can't go into any offices. You basically they had a full on lockdown, and
Hmm.
that affected our operation for I think it was about 2 months. So we was really affected by that, and
So,
yeah, that's why.
so you don't operate. No trainers are allowed to operate on like a remote setup. People are actually, going into the office and training from within the FancyHire offices.
Yeah, we mainly operate from offices for multiple reasons. The majority of our operation is based in an office or a similar setup in terms of environment. Not just like, for example, one of the reasons is electricity. Another reason is the internet.
Mm.
We have to use business ISPs, and that gives us some advantages
Yeah, there's probably
competitively. Yeah.
some cost efficiencies with that as well. Yeah, I guess elaborating on your earlier comments as well about sort of looking after all of your workers and the trainers down in Venezuela. What are some things that you guys do to try and make their lives better and easier?
Yeah, for sure. Um, so generally, we strive to provide a safe working environment for our trainers. We don't want to have an environment that is similar to like a sweatshop, for example. So we
Mm.
want to provide amenities that are often taken for granted in other countries. So we provide the best internet, reliable power, transport to and from the offices, from their homes, from their communities. Um, on top of that, we have relationships with businesses, namely food suppliers for bulk food. So we buy food in bulk for our trainers, and that gives us a way to provide a reliable source of nutrition and food for our trainers.
Mm.
So it's not to the point where every trainer needs to rely on us for their food, but we just have arrangements with various businesses to buy bulk food and then therefore have cheaper prices and make their lives easier. Um, so generally speaking, we're not just a normal business in Venezuela where we are just providing a salary, a basic place to work. We provide extras, so we're sort of like a family in a lot of respects, and we provide things
That's
that you could
awesome.
expect from a family. So when
Mm.
when money is involved, we do everything we can to make the best out of the situation. Yeah.
I also could you I guess shed some light on the role that Bitcoin has played in facilitating this entire operation?
Of course. So, where do we start? So, for RuneScape, the various businesses within it, such as the OSRS services, the gold sites, and anyone else in between, Bitcoin is ultimately the default currency for these type of operations and businesses. So of course, people do use PayPal, which is like more on the risky side in terms of payment methods. But ultimately,
that's due to what, account locking and chargeback risks, and what else?
there's a lot of risks involved. PayPal do not like the business, such as the gold sellers business. They don't like it. It's very hard to operate from PayPal ultimately. So yeah. So ultimately, ultimately it boils down to Bitcoin, and everything about Bitcoin is attractive. So in terms of Venezuela, they have a lot of inflation issues. So although the US dollar seems to be a very popular currency at the moment, what I found interesting was even big business in Venezuela, such as, what's a good example? So we work with a certain ISP. They work with government and private clients, and they accept Bitcoin. So that kind of tells you something on the adoption of Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's been amazing to see, how Bitcoin's been used more broadly down in Venezuela. Obviously a lot of examples get surfaced within the Bitcoin community, but it's awesome to see it at play here as well. Do any of your workers, do they maintain like actual, like net long exposure to Bitcoin, or do they use it just as a value transfer mechanism?
So generally speaking, in Venezuela, you can't really store your wealth in the normal method that everyone else does everywhere else in the world. So Bitcoin is a very attractive method to store value and transfer money and receive money, etc. So I guess as a side note, there's a cryptocurrency exchange called Binance, and they've made some really good investments lately on that front. And what I mean by this is that giving Venezuelans the option of using Binance and then withdrawing into their local currency, which they can then transfer into buying goods and services in Venezuela. So Bitcoin is slowly but surely being used as a bank, basically. If you work, for example, for $10 a month, you can expect a lot of inflation. There's a lot of issues around inflation in Venezuela. It's been like that for a long time now. If you use Bitcoin or a similar technology, it gives the Venezuelan people the opportunity to store their value and at least try and return to some normality in terms of the inflation issues that they have.
Sure. What would you say is something that you found particularly surprising or interesting about how the Venezuelans were operating down there?
There isn't anything in particular. But if I do give you some context, in Venezuela, there's a lot of issues with criminal gangs, organized gangs, militias, corrupt police. It's nowhere near like the normal. Like their normal is nowhere near like our normal, and it's quite hard to give you like a way to imagine it. But just imagine that all the government organizations are corrupt in certain ways, and it's kind of like the entire country is working against you in Venezuela, and nothing is normal. So our normal is nowhere near the normal in Venezuela. So there's a lot of crime going on. It's just it's a very sad situation in Venezuela. But looking on the bright side, there are people out there trying to make money through the internet through virtual labor, and it's giving people the opportunity to live a much better life in Venezuela. And that's all you can do when you live in a bad situation. You can't get out of the situation easily. If you can make the most of it, make some money online, working for some people, then that's what you should do, and it's a very attractive and viable option for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Do you think any of the trainers have hopes to maybe move out of Venezuela, or is that not something you've really discussed with them?
We did discuss moving some of our operation to Colombia. We did look at the financial side of things, and we felt it was best if we stayed in Venezuela to keep our advantage in terms of our competitive advantage. In the future, though, Colombia, for example, is a very attractive location that we will seriously consider again. But for now, we
Interesting.
chose that Venezuela is best to stay where they are. Yeah.
Hey guys, I wanted to tell you about our new sponsor, Crypto.com. Crypto.com's exchange is a rapidly growing trading venue with a strong retail flow. Top institutions can receive a credit line and highly competitive maker taker fees. Their platform is robust, secure, and compliant. You can get started trading today on the Crypto.com exchange, and to get in touch with their institutional sales team, visit bit.ly/cryptodelphi now or click the link in the show notes. Now back to our show.
What would be one thing that you kind of know now or have learned that you wish you knew when you started out on this whole operation?
Um, I would say there. I would say if I was having a conversation with myself when I first started out, like right now, I would say that there's a lot of lessons to learn. Um, Working with Venezuelans, it's not the normal. How do I describe it? So finding the right people is much harder than you think. There are many things that I do wish I would have known. However, to know them, you sort of have to learn the lessons, like every business does. But the
Mm,
lessons that you can expect from a normal business is not the sort of lessons you can expect from operating a business that is, for the most part, from Venezuela.
mm,
So I just wish that I sort of prepared myself more and sort of encouraged any issues and deal with them appropriately.
mm. I was wondering whether, I guess, from your kind of vantage point, from where you guys sit in the ecosystem, whether you could shed any light on the scale at which you think that these kind of services, including botting and gold farming and power leveling services, like in aggregate, how big do you think that side of the economy is? How much real world money do you think is flowing through RuneScape, maybe via Bitcoin or other payment mechanisms?
Hmm. One thing I really like about RuneScape is the scale. That attracted me in the first place to start operating in the RuneScape market. So it's quite hard to grasp the scale, especially if you're looking from the outside and you're not really involved in the marketplace. But I can confidently say that making money through RuneScape is a multi-million-dollar business, and let's just say the people behind the biggest, right? So for some context, some of the biggest gold sites, the biggest services, OSR services, they do a really good job at hiding the value involved within RuneScape, the whole
Mm,
economy, the whole virtual economy. And let's just say if you do choose to enter the market, you will have competitors, and it's a very good journey of learning about business. And so anyone that decides to seriously pursue making money in this market, it's a very exciting and it's not an easy journey,
mm,
basically. So in terms of money, it's a multi-million-dollar business. For example, there was a big gold website, and they sold their business for close to $2 million US dollars.
wow.
That's just an example. So the biggest, I have a few contacts in the biggest gold seller businesses, I guess,
Hmm.
in that sort of side of the business. And some of them, the amount of volume they push through every day is quite mind blowing. So they
Mm,
easily push through 300,000 a month in revenue, for example. I remember I had a good relationship once with another gold business, and they was pushing through. I think they said $8,000 per day in revenue, and
wow.
they just had one main owner and like just a few workers who would help push the gold and the buying and selling side of
And
things.
do you have any idea loosely how much profit they'd actually be taking on that?
It depends. So this is where Venezuela is now getting more attention from the gold side of the RuneScape market. So initially, people would just buy from stakers who are people who just have a lot of money on RuneScape. So they would sell billions of gold, and they would cut that into 1,000 pieces and sell individual, let's say 100 million GP. And on top of that, ultimately, the sort of the margin is anywhere from 5 to 20%, depending on who you use, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So with Venezuela, they are a source of gold sales. So we've noticed recently that some gold shops are directly targeting Venezuelans and getting them to sell gold to them, and then the markup involved is a lot more. The margins are more, so it's more on this. It's more on the 20% side, which is very, very good for their business, and that then gives them the opportunity to affect their competitors through any means. So it just gives them more capital to make an impact.
It's pretty amazing to think about that. I guess that kind of virtual labor arbitrage into somewhere like Venezuela. The idea of even being able to, you know, convert that Bitcoin via sort of RuneScape gold at a 20% margin. It's pretty mind blowing.
Yeah, it's really good when you get to a certain scale. You have your customers, the business. The whole nature of RuneScape promotes you to buy services and gold, and we're taking advantage of the demand, and FancyHire doing it in a way that ultimately we will have the majority of the market share through pricing ultimately, but we also like to focus on quality and make sure that we are even better than businesses that charge in some cases up to 500% more than what we
Wow.
charge for the exact same thing.
Yeah, I mean it's working. As I say, you guys have had a bunch of publicity across various channels and stuff. It's really encouraging to see. I'm curious, which kind of adjacent economies or different kind of game ecosystems have been interesting to you? Have you looked at any outside of RuneScape? And if not, I guess what's uniquely appealing about RuneScape?
Okay, so generally the nature of RuneScape is really unique. So it appeals to it appeals to many people in many different ways. So firstly, it's a low barrier to market for one. Secondly, I'm sure there's a lot of people taking advantage of. So the first one for RuneScape is the low barrier to entry. The second one is, I guess, more of a statement. If you can replicate the same sort of demands and the same sort of low barrier to entry for other markets, then people will take advantage of other opportunities. So there are other ecosystems such as World of Warcraft, anything in similar nature. So in terms of our operation ourselves, right now we're focusing on mastering ourselves in this marketplace, in the RuneScape power leveling marketplace. But we've already made agreements internally that once we're satisfied, which we're very close to becoming satisfied with our operation, we'll look into other avenues of making money through the internet. So this can be through World of Warcraft and or any other sort of game ecosystems. But there's so many opportunities. We're just focusing on one opportunity, laying our concrete, laying the foundations. Once we're happy with the foundations, we'll then start investing into other areas that have higher requirements to the market, higher barriers to the market, and then we'll action accordingly.
And I guess how does that mainly manifest? I guess one of the cool things about RuneScape, especially old school RuneScape, is that you can play it on, even a mobile. So from that point of view, it's really cheap and easy to access in terms of machine required. I'm aware of a bunch of services around, leveling and training camos in games such as Call of Duty, for example. But obviously, those the actual hardware requirements to run them are much higher. So, is that like a sort of primary consideration for you guys when exploring potential future avenues?
Yeah, for sure. So I mentioned the low barrier to entry for RuneScape, and with that I mean the computing power required to play the game is very low. So in Venezuela, you can get access to computers you can get access to computers that can run RuneScape for a fairly good price. So I would say if just so in terms of business models, if you have a business model that can be done with a low powered computer, and it's quite manual and it can't be automated in a certain way, then Venezuela is a very attractive place to operate from. Of course, there's risks. There's a lot of risk involved in certain areas, especially if you're new to the market or to the scene, I guess, in terms of hiring virtual labor from Venezuela. But once you cut out all of the risk, etc., it's a very rewarding place to operate from. And in comparison to other places, let's just call them competitors, who are based in Asia or Colombia, we can afford to charge a cheaper price for the same service. And when customers realize that they can get this exact same end result for cheaper and in some cases faster, it's a very attractive thing for our customers to pursue. And that's why Venezuelan virtual labor is slowly becoming a lot more attractive over time as we build up, in our case, our reputation and building a loyal customer base that we can rely on for business.
Absolutely. I guess you guys are already, and it sounds like, approaching, sort of mastery of this whole, I guess, sort of virtual labor arbitrage. I guess that's kind of at the heart of your business model currently. Do you see any kind of evolution of that on the horizon, like in terms of sort of business models that could eventually sort of dominate across virtual economies?
It's just a matter of imagination, I would say. So it is interesting how cheap labor is utilized, but the limit is your imagination. So ultimately, it just boils down to your imagination, and if you can make it work, you should make it work in Venezuela, because the pricing is a lot cheaper, and if you can master it, you can make a lot of money. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, and then I guess obviously you're sort of boots on the ground running this operation, but in terms of investable surface area, do you see anything that's particularly interesting? I mentioned earlier in the year, actually I was sitting in a bunch of RuneScape Gold when lockdown started, and so as a trade actually made a bunch of money on that. But I guess, is there anything interesting that you think is investable that's worth shedding some light on?
In terms of Venezuelan labor, or?
Well, yeah, I guess that, or like a proxy for that. If people wanted to explore engaging with some of this stuff, how could they do so?
Okay, so RuneScape, for example, is ultimately, it's appealed to us because of its low barrier to entry. But once we have the capital available, we'll make investments in other virtual labor markets, and I have no doubt in that. So if we can provide value, we can do it cheaply, and we can ensure that it's fully scalable. We can beat anyone that operates at a higher price. So it might take us personally some time, but that's fine. So for us, experience is very important as well, and we understand the value of quality. So if you can make a mix that works, it's a very interesting thing to pursue. For sure.
Yeah, it's awesome. And then heading into some of the sort of closing questions here, I was going to ask, and it may be the obvious answer, but what's your favorite video game ever?
I'd say RuneScape, of course.
Love it. Is there anything else a close second or not?
Not really. RuneScape is close to my heart. I
Fair
have
enough.
a good business partner in Venezuela. We speak every day. We talk about ideas for the business. We look at competitors. RuneScape is very much a part of my life, and it's close to my heart, and therefore it's my favorite.
No, I'm a big RuneScape fan as well. My brothers and I all grew up on it. First logged in about 2005, and last logged in about a month ago. So so there
Very
you go.
good, very unique game, and
Yeah.
luckily for our operation, we can appeal to people who don't have the time to play the game, and we can do it very cheaply, and everyone's happy. It's a true win-win situation, and we hope that we can provide better service month on month, and eventually get to a scale where we're sort of dynamically scalable. So it's a very exciting time for us as a business, I guess.
And then, what's the most profound or impactful digital experience that you've ever had?
To sort of tie into our operation, what I found most impactful is starting off just reselling accounts for some Venezuelans, identifying a market opportunity, taking advantage of the market opportunity, and then therefore scaling the business from 5 to 75 people, and then learning all the lessons in between. So ultimately, just being a part of this operation is the most impactful digital experience that I've ever had.
That's amazing. I love that. No, it sounds like you guys are doing something really interesting and really exciting. I still find, the very concept that, something like this is possible so mind-blowing. Obviously, on this podcast, we focus a lot on the metaverse and the evolution of the internet and how people will eventually, live, work, and sort of play in these virtual worlds. But it's amazing to know that it's already happening in such a cool fashion. And then, finally, I was going to ask, out of all the books you've read, which one has resonated with you the most?
I don't remember the name, but I think it made me realise that whatever happens in life, it's not a big deal. And you just do what's in your control, you accept the flow of things, but you make conscious efforts in your life, and life will reward you in unique ways. So setbacks are setbacks. There can be workarounds to obstacles. So as long as you feel you're moving forward and improving, not going backwards, you're onto a winner. So I read a book that I feel that made me feel, that sort of introduced the mindset to me, and it resonated a lot with me. Yeah.
Well, yeah, if you remember the title, you have to let me know.
I will.
Anyway, Duck, this has been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed, and I hope everyone listening has also enjoyed getting to know more about your operation and what you guys are up to. I'd love to stay in touch and see how the operation evolves. And perhaps once you hit 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 full-time employees, we could have you back on again and see how things are going.
Yeah, it's a very exciting time. It's very exciting scaling a business, looking at all the different areas where you can scale it, identifying all the problems, etc. So it's a very, very exciting time for us, and we're at a stage now where we can start scaling fairly fast, fairly quickly, and I wouldn't be surprised looking back now within the last year or two that we've been operating, how we've grown. I wouldn't be surprised if we end up with several thousand people working for us from all different countries, and we provide a very good value. Very good value for our customers and businesses and whoever wants to purchase our services.
Brilliant. Well, thank you once again, Duck. It's been a pleasure.
Same. I appreciate your time. I appreciate giving me the opportunity for this podcast. I know it's not in a sense, a normal podcast, but with Venezuela, there's a lot of opportunity, and we're one of the early ones, especially for the RuneScape market, to take advantage of the Venezuelans. And it's really causing a lot of fuss within our competitors. We get copied a lot. People try to learn more things about us, and it's very interesting to see the reaction of the market to Venezuelans, a serious Venezuelan operation entering their market. So if we can do this for RuneScape, we can do this for many different markets, and I look forward to being a good competitor to some businesses, and my business partner and everyone else involved on a high level within our operation is very, very excited for the future, and we're all level-headed with our goals, and let's just say we're very excited, and that's an understatement. So thank you very much. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed it, please support the show by hitting subscribe on iTunes, writing a review, or sharing this episode on Twitter and LinkedIn. And stay tuned for our next episode out soon.